Well, good afternoon. It is July 9th, one day after my birthday, which was a great day yesterday.
Happy day. People can't see, but I'm throwing confetti in the air.
And balloons are falling from the sky. They're virtual balloons like they do on my phone when somebody sends me happy birthday. It's actually kind of annoying. Hey, John, it's Michael. And how are you doing today? It's Michael VanDervort, and I'm here with my co-host, John Hyman. We're doing one of our sporadic shows to talk a bit about labor relations and labor law and what in general is going on in the world. So it's been a couple of months since we did the last show, John. We were talking about 100 days of the Trump administration. And I don't know, maybe another 100,000 have gone by, but there's been a lot going on, and I know we'll get into that. But how are you
Every
doing?
every day feels like a millennium. I'm doing well, trying to enjoy my summer as best I can.
Yeah, it's been surprisingly pleasant here in Oklahoma. Usually we get real muggy, but it's been nice. I'm kind of I was at the pool over the 4th of July and walking around in the park, and I wasn't sweating to death. So it was a good weekend too. Did you have a good Fourth?
That's why it was really hot here. It was in the 90s and super muggy. So we have all the heat and humidity up here in Northeast Ohio. So, but I'm also not feeling overly patriotic these days.
Yeah.
So we kind of self boycotted a lot of July 4th related regalia and just had a nice quiet weekend. My big activity for the weekend is I took the power washer out and power washed our deck finally. So that
There
was
you go.
that was very exciting.
Drew little figures in the wood and all that. No, my ex, she was very particular about how the wood got washed, so she always did it herself so that she knew it was done right. And I don't think that I ever deliberately hatched a plan to kind of screw it up to encourage her, but that might have been in play at some point. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. One last sporadic thing from the Fourth. I saw F1. It was the best summer movie I've seen in about 5 years. I mean, it's got no plot. It's just race fast, but it was outstanding. I really enjoyed it. So if you haven't
Ah,
seen it and you're
cool.
looking for a fun summer movie, check it out.
Yeah, I'm thinking of maybe checking out Superman this weekend, partly because I like Superman, partly because it was a good chunk of it was filmed here in Cleveland, which stands in for Metropolis. And from what I've seen of the footage on commercials, Cleveland looks amazing in the movie. So thinking about checking that out this weekend.
90% Rotten Tomatoes ratings out of the gate, and a controversy about the immigration of an alien from another planet to
Yeah,
Earth.
and it's pissed off Fox News, which I guess is an unintended benefit of the movies.
Anyway, okay. So let's actually talk about labor law and labor relations for a minute, since this is labor relatedly episode who knows what 20 or something like that. So we haven't really done a show literally since like a couple months ago, and this has been developing. It's been hanging around for a while, and it doesn't appear to be going anywhere soon. But the NLRB is kind of in an authority crisis right now. Gwen Wilcox, one of the sitting Democrat members, if you will, Democratic members of the board, was fired by President Trump a few months ago, and she's been in and out of court. And basically, the court has said that she remains fired. So the board has no quorum. Marvin Kaplan, who's been on the board for quite a while and is the current chair, leaves in about a month-ish, month and a half. So that basically means David Prudy will be everything. He'll be the majority board chair, unless they announce some new, unless they announce and really quickly confirm a couple of new board members.
Which
The
which
board
which
has
also
been
makes
out
him
of business,
nothing.
and it
Yeah,
remains out of business.
it makes him, you say he's everything, but he's also nothing because he can't do anything on his own. So
I had this vision of him like playing Fortnite at his desk on his phone, because there's really not much else he can do right now.
it's lonely at the top.
So why does this matter? It's not a good thing, seriously, joking around about Fortnite and whatever. It's not a good thing for employers. It's really not a good thing for unions. It's really not good for anybody. But why is it happening? Gridlock? Politics?
It's a really good question. I mean, you would think, right? So it's now July, so we're, 5.5, 6 months into the Trump administration. The 4 years before that were the Biden administration, with a good portion of that under a Democrat majority board that issued union and employee friendly decisions and handed down union and employee favorable holdings, setting board law and board policy. And so without a quorum right now, all of those decisions that are out there from the Biden's board remain the law of the board. And so the board, for better or for worse, it's sways with the majority viewpoint of the members on the board when the board has a quorum. And so when there's a 3-2 Democratic majority appointed board, you get typically more favorable employee union favorable policies and rulings. And conversely, when it's a 3-2 Republican majority appointed board, you get more management friendly decisions coming out of the board. Without there being a quorum right now, the board is unable to issue any decisions. And so you're left with the decisions from the last administration being the law of the law of the board. And you would think that the Trump administration would want to put its management friendly stamp on the current NLRB and get business friendly people appointed in majority appointed on the board so they can start doing business to favor employers. And I'm not saying that the board presupposes or pre-decides cases, but everybody comes with their own kind of prejudices and predilections. And when you have management side lawyers appointed to the NLRB, they're likely going to see things under a management side. You would think that you'd want those people appointed to the board so they can start doing business in a way that would potentially and likely be more friendly for employers, but they haven't. And so, yeah, it's puzzling as to why anybody thinks the status quo, that is the status quo of nothing, right? No business being done because there's no quorum, why that helps anybody, because it doesn't. And you would think they'd want to make appointments and get the board moving again. But
yeah, I mean, Kerry Burke posted about this morning, I think on LinkedIn, or maybe it was yesterday afternoon, but recently, and that was his take. It's like, this is no good for anybody.
No, it's terrible.
And then essentially it's only going to get worse because budgets are getting cut, and there are rumors that the NLRB is going to lose 100 people. They already say they don't have sufficient staff to handle their business. And so it just drags everything out. And then to your point, from a business perspective, until they get a majority from on the Republican side, something like Cemex, which they would probably reverse, I would guess. I
imagine that would be very high on the agenda of things to get rid of once the right case came in front of the board. And
but they can't do that with no board, right?
It's easy. I mean, the right case would be the first time, you've got a union demanding recognition under Cemex. You have the right case almost immediately, and it would seem very easy for that to be on the chopping block. And so that remains the law of the land. And how that favors how anybody thinks that's employer friendly, it's mind-boggling to me.
There was a kind of a weird, the chamber release. Did you see this chamber email? Labor Relations Committee email where they released a thing that said 2 people had been named to the board, and then it was like maybe 5 minutes later, it was like, please disregard. So maybe there's something going on, but like really, even I'm not wired into DC or anything, but there's not even a lot of chatter about who.
And it's not just the NLRB. I mean, it's the EEOC too. Now the EEOC can do a little. I mean, they can file lawsuits, and there's some other stuff they can do. Where the NLRB really, I mean, without a quorum, they really can't do business. And you think about the backlog of cases this is creating. It just doesn't make any sense to me why this is being allowed to continue unless there is some political strategy behind it that we're not privy to.
Yeah, it really doesn't make sense. And yet we could say that for a while and we won't solve it. So hopefully at some point they'll proceed with nominating. I mean, they need to nominate 4 board members at some point. Plus, and then the GC, I don't think that she's been scheduled. She's been nominated, but I don't think they've even scheduled a hearing or anything yet. So that's also stalled. That's not a prior. They've been too busy with the big beautiful bill or the big ugly bill or whatever it is. So we're gonna
and the reality is, I mean, Congress is pretty much they're on recess now, right? So nothing is going to happen until they're back in September anyway. So I think it's September when they come back. But DC is pretty much closed for the summer, or at least the Capitol Hill is. So
that effectively means there won't be anything with the board until probably January, even if they acted extremely expeditiously when they get back, which is unlikely. That's wild. Anyway, okay, we've got a couple different topics. I'm going to jump. So there's a case, I don't know what the case name was, but it was University Hospital, and 2 pediatricians were allegedly disciplined for using the internal directory at work to talk about forming a union. and they filed unfair labor practice charges, obviously alleging retaliation by being fired. And so there's a couple of things that are like couple things that are interesting here. One is physicians have traditionally not been unionized, but that's changing. There's been some elections in Boston and other places, so physicians are becoming increasingly interested in unionizing in the face of all the healthcare changes, which we're going to have massive amount of change for the next few years because of the new funding and everything. So, but let's talk about I know there was the purple case and all that stuff, but let's just talk briefly about that retaliation and internal communications. What do employers need to be thinking about there, John?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, unless you are you can regulate or restrict. If you're an employer, you can regulate or restrict your employees' use of your internal systems, like, emails or internal directories or other things, but you got to do it. You got to do it consistently. And if you're only enforcing it to punish or root out or to impact your employees when they're using it for union organizing, you got a big 883 issue on your hands, because you are discriminating against those employees for using it for a union purpose when you're not enforcing it against employees for using it for any other purpose. And so you think about all the reasons why your employees might be using let's focus on this case, which was an internal electronic directory of personnel. Why your employees might be using that, maybe they want to invite coworkers to, a social event or to a wedding or a baby shower outside of work, or they want to, they're compiling their Christmas card list for their whatever, all non-work related purposes. If you're going to allow any of that, you better allow it for union organizing or union related purposes too, or you got a big issue on your hands under the act.
Yeah, and it's not just electronic either, right? It can be the old fashioned, analog media, right? Postings on bulletin boards and selling things,
Yeah,
having
it's
signups for ordering candy in break rooms.
any workplace communications. I say bulletin board because that's what this case happened to be about. It was a directory. It was like an online. It was like an electronic, like an intranet directory of staff. But
Right.
yeah, but it's really
It could be like literally put a pin in the court type of posting as well, right?
Yeah, any of that.
How anal? So I know what I used to do at one of my former employers. We used to walk around even in our corporate office and check the break rooms, usually about once a week, just looking in there. It was casual, but if we saw something specific that looked like it might violate our non-solicitation policy, we would remove it and go speak to that person. We didn't discipline them. We just said, here, we took this down and here's why. And then we would, document that we had done so to be able to show in case that we had a consistent practice in case it ever became an issue, which it never did. But how anal do you have to be over this type of stuff? I mean, where's the boundaries? Is there any safe area?
I mean, how anal do you have to be? I mean, I guess as anal as you can, as reasonably anal as you can under the circumstances. I mean,
probably not the right terminology to use, but
well,
sorry.
As uptight, as strict.
Yes.
I mean, you don't. You're not the bulletin board police. You're not the communication police. But if you want to be able to enforce it against the unions when you know about it, you need to enforce it in other circumstances when you know about it too. And there's not really a de minimis exception here. So if you want to enforce it against the unions and you see, please buy Girl Scout cookies for my kid flyer on the bulletin board, you probably should pull it down because you're potentially setting yourself up for an issue down the road. But I don't think you have to, I don't think you have to walk around. I don't think you have to, police every communication on your network or walk around and police every bulletin board and wall and square inch of your facility, to be proactive, but you certainly have to be reactive when you see this stuff.
Yeah. I didn't have a like a pre-scripted item on this, but I mentioned in the pre-show I wanted to ask about this. Last week, I think a regional director had a case where they came down and said that recording in a collective bargaining session was not okay. That's the gist of it. And again, I didn't really pull a case or send it to you ahead of time to look at. So I don't know I don't know if you had a chance to read it or not, but I just wanted to
hadn't seen that case. Certainly as a management representative. I can't imagine a situation where I would allow the union to record a bargaining session. That just seems like
you wouldn't agree to that, right?
I would never agree to that. And so surreptitiously, if they were to record it, I suppose. Well, right. So now you have, a board decision, or someone. Well, was it an? I'm assuming it was an ALJ.
Yeah, I think it was an ALJ. I said regional director. It's probably ALJ.
Yeah, so, saying that, that was not legal under the act. I applaud that. I mean, from a legal standpoint, depending on where you are, different states have different rules. Some states are one-party consent. Some states are two-party consent, meaning that in a one-party consent state, as long as one person to a conversation consents to it being recorded, and that would be like if you're in the conversation and record it, you're not violating that state's wiretapping statute. Other states are two-party consent states, meaning that you need everyone in the conversation to agree to it being recorded for the recording not to be illegal. Because Ohio is a one-party consent state where I am, I always tell, for example, like HR reps when they're terminating someone, like assume it's being recorded because you don't know, because everybody has recording devices in their pockets now. It's easy. You just got to hit the little record button on your phone, and everybody now has the ability to record everything. ChatGPT, I think I just saw, is going to start making like transcription as well, where you'll be able to record through ChatGPT and it'll transcribe what's being recorded.
There's quite a few tools that do that.
Yeah.
I actually misspoke. It wasn't a case. It was actually Bill Cowan. So here's the details for those, so that we actually sound like we know a little bit about what we're talking about. On June 25th, so it was about a week and a half ago, or 2 weeks ago, Bill Cowan issued a GC memorandum 2507. And it argued that if an employer or union surreptitiously records collective bargaining negotiations, then they've automatically violated the NLRA. While not binding, memorandum indicates a bright line policy priority for the NLRB General Counsel and the agency's line prosecutors for future cases, and provides important guidance to bargaining parties in their negotiations. And then there's like a rationale, which I won't read, but if you want to go look at it, that's where it came from.
I mean, it makes sense. It's good policy. It seems to be. I mean, you're agreeing you as a matter of, you agree to everything else in bargaining. You agree to when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, who's going to be there, what the rules of the bargaining. You agree to all that. And so to allow one party just to kind of break rank and decide they're going to surreptitiously record without getting the consent of the other side, it seems to me pretty sound policy that shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And like in the olden days of bargaining, when I did it, the last one I did was probably 20 years ago. We used to agree that, generally between the parties, everything that was said in the room stayed in the room until we had a tentative agreement. That isn't necessarily true today in today's social media world. People text from the room at times and different things. So it doesn't work the same way anymore. And it's hard to enforce those agreements because what are you going to do? I mean, but anyway, that was the old school way of doing things, I guess. Let's pivot, add a couple more things. So I saw this interesting discussion amongst some labor lawyers and others, practitioners on Twitter a week or so ago, where there were a couple of workplace violence events that took place. I think one was at a Walmart or something. Then I forget the details of the other, but in one of the cases, there had been some threats, and there had been, and it wound up being in a kind of like employee on employee violence. But they had raised and flagged the issues to the employer, and and the question was, how far do you go in like an investigation in that situation? That was sort of the gist of the conversation. Is the employer obligated? How do they know what's true? How do you prevent? What do you talk to clients about when it comes to that type of a situation, John, which is seemingly more and more prevalent? It's been around for a long time, but it seems like it's happening more frequently these days in our angry society.
I'll tell you what keeps me up at night and what costs me sleep is the thought of getting a phone call from a client on an issue that I advised them on, that so-and-so came back into the workplace and did something, or waking up in the morning and finding out there was a mass casualty event at a client, and it was a workplace issue that I was involved in giving them advice on. And I don't think in this day and age, I don't think you can be too careful in how you respond to threats that come into or are related to the workplace. I just don't think you could be too careful. People are freaking nuts nowadays, and everybody seems to be on a hair trigger. And I would rather overreact and face the consequences. And I don't think the consequences in overreacting are that great or underreact. I don't think it's wrong to send someone to an EAP if you think someone is presenting off in the workplace. I don't have an issue with that. I think if, there's the ADA, I mean, people worry about, are we discriminating against someone because of their disability, mental health issues? I mean, the ADA is going to give employers some cover under a direct threat analysis. But I would rather overreact and deal with the consequences, whatever those consequences may be, than underreact and deal with those consequences. Because the consequences of the latter are a lot more scary, a lot scarier, and a lot more dangerous than I might get a demand letter from a plaintiff's lawyer saying you discriminated against my client because of a mental health issue or whatever.
I was at a conference event in the spring where a company somebody that was speaking from a company there talked about a shooting incident that had happened in one of their locations, a public facing location where I guess I wasn't there, so I don't know if this is completely accurate, but a mentally ill person killed a police officer who was off duty shopping in the store, and talked about the devastating impact it had on the company, the people at the store, the community. And then in this really unexpected moment, one of the people in the audience stood up and said, "I knew that police officer. I used to work out with him." Like, I mean, it was like both stirring, like because he praised the company for like the way they'd handled it and what they did to kind of bring the community back together. But it was also very unsettling to realize that you're sitting in the, where like somebody that was right next door to, that knew that person very well, and it had directly impacted him. Very impactful, kind of unexpected moment. But man, it's tough. I think from a practitioner point of view, like, do active shooter drills, do the training, teach people the exits, make sure they know if you're dealing with people that you have some reason to believe might be, willing to act out, if you have to discipline them. I mean, in the past, I personally have had police standing by on, that kind of thing.
I always recommend to clients when they're firing someone, disciplining or firing someone that they think might be at risk for a violent reaction, put your local police on notice, have them run patrols. I've brought in private security for a period of time after a termination that can be on premises 24/7 as well for where the situation warrants. I have no issue with getting Pinkerton or someone else out there to give on site, and a little bit of deterrence really might go a long way, where someone sees that armed presence on site, that might deter them from coming back and doing something stupid. But in terms of like violence and threats, to me, it's a zero tolerance policy. To me, that's your one-way ticket to unemployment, and I'll deal with the consequences if they want to. If they want to file a grievance, or they want to, go have a lawyer send me a nasty gram saying, "Oh, you fired me because I'd much rather deal with that than deal with that we didn't do enough. Now we're counting bullet holes in the wall. I just can't."
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Okay, that concludes the labor law, labor relations portion of the program. And we're going to turn to a couple of different things that are more political. So we're about to enter the woke part of the show. So for those folks who maybe will be not happy to hear those opinions, thanks for listening, and we'll hopefully see you next time. But yeah, so anyway, caveat emptor, I guess, from here on out, however you say that in Latin. A couple things, John. I want to talk about your Substack, because I know this is like I'm joking a little bit with that, but like it's really not funny and it's really not a joke. I just know there are people with different opinions, and so I want to recognize that, I guess. There's a bill,
Biological Truth to the Workplace Act.
Yeah, that was introduced last week or so ago. We also have a Supreme Court case called Bostock. I think that's how you say it. That says that
from 2020. Yep.
Yeah, and so we're in this this has to deal with transgender issues for the most part, and you and I are both allies to that community, and for various reasons. So that this is like all politics. This is all performative politics, in my opinion, right? But the bill,
it's political. It's political theater, is what it is.
Yeah, theater.
So let's give the legal background, right? So in 2020, the Supreme Court, in Bostock, said that Title VII protects LGBTQ plus individuals from discrimination, that discrimination against gay and lesbian employees is because of sex, and discrimination against transgender workers is because of sex. And so sex in Title VII equals gay, lesbian, transgender, LGBTQ plus protected. That's been the law of the land now for 5 years. The transgender piece has become a talking point of the right. Just they can't they they see it as it's an affront to their religious liberties, it's an affront to it injures their children. They don't want to what if I don't want man in my bathroom, or in my locker room or whatever. So, and if you read the polling data, that they get traction on that issue, even among people that, identify as more liberal, and Democrats are not, they get traction there too with their anti-trans rhetoric. And so, this bill, this restoring, what did I say it was called? The Restoring Biological Truth to the Workplace Act.
Yes.
Would essentially rewrite Title VII to undo Bostock's interpretation, to make it clear that Title VII does not protect transgender individuals. It would, so for example, and if that became the law, then an employer would not be able to require pronoun usage to identify individuals with the pronouns that match their gender identity. Their pronouns would have to match their biological sex at birth. You would require, employers would not be able to allow transgender women to use the women's restroom. They'd have to use the restroom with the bathroom that corresponds with their biological sex.
Well, transgender men in
transgender men, right. That's although remarkably, like, most of the people that have the issue with the bathroom piece are the women, right? They don't want,
right.
Right. I wrote about this on LinkedIn, and then, as expected, my feed blew up, mostly with people telling me how awful transgender people are. And the point on the bathroom piece, the part that I can't, I'm not transgender, right? I know some transgender people, but I don't know firsthand the struggles that they've lived with through their life. I know secondhand from what they've told me, right, of how difficult it is to live an identity that doesn't correspond to the identity of the person that you actually are. It boggles my mind that somebody would basically live their entire life as a lie, would be bullied, discriminated against, harassed, have their real gender identity suppressed, etc., all because they want to go in and ogle women or watch a woman go to the bathroom, right, in the woman's restroom, right? It's just mind-boggling to me. And where I come out on the issue is, let's just let people live and let live. It doesn't. If somebody wants to be a she, let them be a she. If they want to be a he, let them be a he. If they want to be a they, whatever. It doesn't affect me. I don't care. Be whoever you want to be. Live and let live. Let's all exhibit a little bit of compassion and empathy and kindness, and let's all just go about our lives. And this, to me, is such a huge issue about nothing. The only people this matters to are the people that are being denied their gender identity. And so let's fix this for them, and let's just all go about our lives. That's where I come down on it. So
it's a political issue, and it gets traction, and there's celebrities, Harry Potter franchise people, and that kind of thing.
Martina Navratilova.
It's a much bigger issue than the population of people that actually are involved with. It's a much bigger issue than it makes any sense. But it is one that shakes people in a lot of ways. And anyway, so I suggest one other, let's just build all bathrooms with just one door, one toilet. And, you go in there on your own, and then nobody cares because it's just you doing your business. Thank you very much. But
the bathrooms have, full doors, right? You can't peek under the, right. Which by the way, I'm fine with. I don't understand why we have space where people can, not that. Right. Anyway.
Yeah, I actually kind of prefer it that way personally. However, that conversation, that topic is one of many that get people going these days. We try not to be a political show, but I know you have this is a huge issue for you. The whole thing of how our society is trending, and you've started a new Substack. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
It's called Authoritarian Alarm. I started it a couple weeks ago. I've been, in the last 6 months plus, I've been writing more and more kind of on LinkedIn and on my blog that I've had now for, 18 plus years. I've been writing more and more on some more political type issues, less employment law, more politics, because I see a lot of parallels between what's happening in the US now and, for example, like what happened in Germany in 1933. I think we can see parallels to what happened in countries like Hungary more recently that went down a more authoritarian path. And it worries me a lot about kind of where our country is headed and what our democracy is going to look like, and if we're still going to have a democracy. Are we going to have midterms in 2026? It worries me. And so what I decided was, I decided to kind of untangle my labor and employment law writing for my political writing. And so I started this Substack called Authoritarian Alarm, where I'm posting, I don't know, a couple times a week, 2, 3, 4 times a week, covering, what I see as some of the more troubling political issues. And so, I've written a couple of times on Alligator Alcatraz, right? The detention center they built in the Everglades down in Florida. I have a post that'll go live tomorrow, Thursday, about the woke Superman, right? And right. So, and writing about some, how Trump is authoritarian and kind of what that means historically, putting into historical perspective and some parallels between, Hitler and Trump, for example. And I'm not a historical scholar, but I mean, I was a history major. I've done a lot. I do read a lot, and I've read a lot on this stuff, and it's troubling kind of where we're headed. And more troubling to me is that, like, the apologists that are out there, the people that are okay with this, the people that are okay with building what appears to be a concentration camp in the middle of a swamp surrounded by alligators. It doesn't bother them. That there's a large, I'm not saying a majority, but a large enough percentage of this country that isn't bothered by that is okay with, armed, militarized police forces pulling kids out of homes and pulling kids out of school and separating them from their families and kicking them out of the country, or sending people to foreign prisons where they have no due process, where everybody admits these prisons are like just giant human rights violations and people aren't bothered by that. And we should be bothered by it, because it's not who we are as a country, or it shouldn't be who we are as a country. It's where we're going as a country. And so I felt a moral obligation to kind of start the Substack and start writing on this stuff. Mildly concerned that it's going to give me an issue getting back in the country in a couple of weeks when I travel. Although, as a U.S. citizen, I hope my passport will allow me entry back into the U.S. But I share a mild concern that CBP is going to harass me at the border. It'll make for a good story if it happens, I suppose. But no, I felt a moral obligation to start writing this and to call attention out. Because if people who have something to say don't say it, we're going to wake up in 6 months and we're going to be hungry, or we're going to be worse. And that's not where I want this country to go.
Seriously, you're the second person in a month that said that was traveling somewhere out of the country and said, I hope they'll let me back in, which I have to admit, I never would thought that would be something that I would hear people say on the regular.
I know non-citizens who have not been allowed back in. I know of at least 2 permanent residents, so non-U.S. citizens, but U.S. permanent residents who are not allowed entry back into the U.S. They got back in eventually, but it took weeks or months and a lot of kind of wrangling on the, behind the scenes to get them back in. So I know it's happening. I know as a U.S. citizen, with a U.S. issued passport, they can't deny me access to the country, but it doesn't mean they won't harass me at the border. And so it gives me concern. And here we are, right? The greatest country on the earth, the beacon of, the shining light on the hill, right? The beacon of democracy. And I'm worried whether, border, give me a hard time at the border because of my exercise of my free speech rights. So go figure.
Yeah. Well, respect for having hopefully the high ground, but we'll see. So thanks for doing the show. Enjoy your trip. I won't say where you're headed. That way, maybe they'll know. They have facial recognition. No, yeah. Enjoy your trip. I'll talk to you again after you get back sometime down the road. And thanks for doing this, John. Have a great rest of the week.
You too. Happy birthday again.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Take care.
Yeah.